Now let us start the geological. Previously we studied about the principle of stratigraphy, different way of correlation. Now look at here the geological time scale. So if you remember, in previous slide we show you two cartoon. One is physiographic division and other is the tectonic divisions of the Indian subcontinent. In tectonic division of Indian subcontinent, I show you the different cratons, the position of different cratons and mobile wells. Now from geological time scale, obviously we are going to study the Indian stratigraphy. That means we are going to study about the Indian subcontinent. So we are only interested what changes took place in the history of the earth in the Indian subcontinent when they are on the positions presented. So in Indian subcontinent, I previously told you that there are four well established cratons that was formed in the Archean time, right? All the cratons are of Archean age. There are two very well developed sedimentary basins, that is the Purana basin, that is Vindhyan and Kadapa. There is other also Purana also basins like Chhattisgarh, Indravati, Bhima, Kaladagi. These all are basins that are of Proterozoic age. After that, the Proterozoic, when the Paleozoic started, then now you can see that in Indian subcontinent there is no any single larger formation. There is no any single larger formation present in the Indian Peninsula India. In the Peninsula India, you can recall all these formations and you will not find any single larger formation in the Indian Peninsula. The reason behind it is still not clear, why we not get any larger formation in the Indian Peninsula in the Paleozoic age. But this is a fact that we are not going to find any larger formation in the Indian Peninsula in the Paleozoic time. But as the time passes, in starting Paleozoic, the formation were taking place in the extra Peninsula India. That is like Baikrata formation, Tal, Crawl. These all are formations that are formed in the extra peninsula of India that are of Paleozoic age of the Cambrian and Ordovician age. The Mutquardiite. These all the we found important formation from the Paleozoic age, like especially from the Cambrian, Ordovician, Devonian age. Of all these are in the extra peninsula India, not in the Peninsula India. But as the time passes, in Devonian, when the time comes to the close to the Carboniferous, then the formation again started in the Indian Peninsula, and that is called the largest, one of the largest formation in the history of the earth is the Gondwana formation. Gondwana formation started the sedimentation was taking place from the Carboniferous, starting of the Carboniferous, and they end up to the Triassic. So before that there is no any single larger formation in the Indian Peninsula, but after the Carboniferous, again in Indian Peninsula India, the formation, the depositions, the sedimentation were taking place. Like after the Carboniferous, the first major formation was the Gondwana formation, and that is very important not only for the sedimentation, that is from the economic point of view, because all of the coal reserve that we today find in the Indian subcontinent today and good grades are from the Gondwana formation. Like Permian's age of the Permian's coals of the Gondwana are very nice, and in fact I think bituminous rank, all these bituminous rank coals that we found today in Indian Peninsula is all of the Gondwana formation. So after the Gondwana, when the time comes into the Mesozoic, then again we can see the formations of the Mesozoic in the Peninsula India, like Jurassic of Kutch, Cretaceous of Trishnopali. These all the formations that are in the Peninsula India that are of the Mesozoic age that we found today in the Indian Peninsula. But before that, the Carboniferous, there is a no single formation. After Mesozoic, there is a continuous small or larger formations. We correlated and found in the Cenozoic also some formation like in Assam, and there is other some important petroliferous basins. These all are of, that is, these are the sequential. So in geological time scale, we are going to understand, or we are going to try to understand about the history of the earth, especially for the Indian Peninsula India, that what Peninsula India or Indian subcontinent, what happens through the geological time. So before going to study about that, in our mind the major confusion or questions was that when the life comes into the earth surface, when the life comes onto the earth surface, this was the major questions previously, that when life comes into exist on the earth's planet of the earth, the origin of the water was not very well understood till now. The origin of the water, in some literature they said that the water comes from the asteroid impact. In some literature, the reason given in the condensation and the various things, 3 to 4 hypotheses they give. We will not going to trap into that process, that how the water comes, but we should know that the history of the water is very earlier, like 3.7 4.0 billion years that comes onto the earth's surface, or maybe before that. I am not very clear about that, but water comes onto the earth's surface very earlier. The question is that when the life comes into existence and when the oxygen comes into existence in the earth history, because these two factors completely changes the history of the earth and completely changes the way the earth is forming. Like, first of all, let me know you that first of all, after the existence of the water, the fossils or the life that comes onto the earth that can capable to live without the oxygen, that are capable to live without oxygen. So before oxygen, life was also there. Before oxygen, life was also there, but that life is not very diversified and they are very unicellular in nature, very soft bodied, because the history of the life, in some literature they said that 3.8 3.7, these different ages of the life that in books they are given. That means overall you can understand that at the end of the 3.5 billion year, the life is already there on the earth, So the history of the life on the earth is older than 3.5 billion year, but the oxygen that is present today on the earth comes around 2.5 to 2.7 billion year. So there is a long gap between the existence of the life and the existence of the oxygen on the earth. So first of all, life already is there, existed. After that, by some processes, especially to come the oxygen presence, for the oxygen presence, the one who is responsible is known as the cyanobacteria. And at that time, the oxygen was the byproduct, or you can say the best product for the cyanobacteria. Right? So the history of oxygen is like 2.7 to 2.5 billion year. So let us see the geological time scale. Geological time scales are divided into various, like one is a larger unit, one is a smaller unit. So broadly they are divided into the two parts. Precambrian, before Precambrian age, like Cambrian fall at the age approximately 542 million year. Before this age, all comes under the Precambrian. So you can understand that the history of the earth before the Cambrian, almost, if you will divide 542 upon 4500, you can get approximately 12%. It means that the 88% of the earth history are preserved before the Cambrian. That Precambrian consists about 88% of the history of the earth. Only 12% after the Cambrian is 542 millennia, right? So there is a long time spans of the Precambrian. Further, Precambrians are divided into two parts, that is Archean and Proterozoic. Archean and Proterozoic. First of all, the whole of the geological time scales are divided into two parts. One is Precambrian and other is Phanerozoic. The further Precambrians are divided into two parts. The first one is Archean and next one is Proterozoic. Further, Archean again divided into three parts, like Eoarchean, Paleoarchean, four parts, sorry, Mesoarchean and Neoarchean. The age of these are important broadly. You should remember that at 36,400 to before the 4,000 the Hadean is informally, but the lower limit is still matter of debate. So more or less 4,000 to 4,600 there is a time period that is called the Hadean. From 4,000 to 3,600 they are called Eoarchean. 36 to 3,200 they are called Paleoarchean. 32 to 2,800 they are called the Mesoarchean, and 28 to 2,500 they are called the Neoarchean. These boundaries are very important from Neoarchean, that means the Archean Proterozoic boundary. Archean Proterozoic boundary. These are very important. Sometimes in question they ask you the age about the Archean Proterozoic boundary. So the age of the Archean Proterozoic boundary is 2,500. Again, Proterozoic is also further divided into three parts. First one is Paleoproterozoic, Mesoproterozoic and Neoproterozoic. These are further divided into three parts: Paleoproterozoic, Mesoproterozoic and Neoproterozoic. The broader age of these are also important, like Paleoproterozoic falls into from 2,500 million year to the 1,600 million year. From 1,600 million year to 1,000 million year there is a Mesoproterozoic, and from 1,000 to 540 there is a Neoproterozoic age. So you have to remember at this Paleoproterozoic, Mesoproterozoic, Neoproterozoic, because sometimes in the basins, like they will ask you the sedimentary Purana basin is of what is Mesoproterozoic basin, Neoproterozoic basin, Paleoproterozoic basin. In these languages in the literature they write. So you have to understand that, and you have to remember that the Paleoproterozoic means the age span of 2,500 to the 1,600. The Mesoproterozoic age span of 1,600 to 1,000, and the Neoproterozoic age span of 1,000 to 542 millennia. So these are further they are divided into like Siderian, Daenian, Oceanian, Stratharian. Mesoproterozoic further divided into Astanian, Icastanian, Calaminian. Neoproterozoic are divided into Cryogenian, Tonian, Ediacaran. These periods are not very important, but few of them are important, especially like if we are talking about the Neoproterozoic, then Tonian, Ediacaran, Cryogenian. These all three are a remarkable and very significant changes that were taking place in the earth history. Like Cryogenian is a major glaciation in the earth history. Cryogenian was the major glaciation that was taking place in the earth history. That is one of the main reason to change the life habitat from the Precambrian to Cambrian, because these are approaching the boundary of the Cambrian. After that, before that, the climate, the environment were different. After the Cryogenian, there is a huge glaciation. After that Cryogenian, there were changes that took place in the earth history were different. The Ediacaran is a special significance because it marks the boundary. Ediacaran fossils is very important in the geological history because it marks the boundary between Precambrian to Cambrian. So these stages, these periods are very important. So you should remember that the Tonian, Cryogenian, Ediacaran. But all these, not everyone is capable to remember. And if you can do, then you can do. That will be the good. But if you not, then it's okay. okay, because all of the stages are not always possible to remember, but you have to remember is at least this boundary you should remember, like Paleoproterozoic, Mesoproterozoic, Neoproterozoic, these broader Proterozoic between ages you should remember. Another thing is that the boundary between these times are clearly defined, but the boundary between these are not very well defined. The boundary that between these are very well marked by GSSP, global stratotype, type and section, that is called by the GSSP. They are very well exposed, but a smaller unit, these are not very frequently occurring, that is why they are not very popular. But some event that happens, this one is very important, like Tonian, Cragenian, Edekarian, like Siderian, these some few in Proterozoic, few are very important, so you should studied about these phenomena. After that, so initially we divided in Precambrian and Phanerozoic. Again, Phanerozoic are divided into different era, like Paleozoic, Mesozoic and Cenozoic. Phanerozoic are divided into 3 different eras. First one is Paleozoic, second one is Mesozoic, and third one is second one is Mesozoic and third one is Cenozoic. So in from Phanerozoic, Paleozoic further divided into Cambrian, that is lower Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, and Carboniferous. Further divided into 2 important parts, like Mississippian and Peninsulian. And further, after Carboniferous, there is a Permian that marks the boundary between the Paleozoic and Mesozoic, that is popularly known as the Mesozoic Permian-Triassic boundary, right? Permian-Triassic boundary marked by the major changes, like the extinction. Majority of about 96% of the species were extinct at this boundary. After the Paleozoic, there is a Mesozoic era that is further divided into 3 parts, Triassic, Jurassic and Cretaceous. Again, there is a major changes at the Cretaceous because the extinctions were taking place at the KT boundary. It is also called Cretaceous Paleogene boundary, KPG boundary. Cretaceous KPG boundary, it is also known as KPG boundary, right? Cretaceous Paleogene boundary. This is also marked by the major mass extinction. Further, Cenozoic further divided into 3 parts, like Paleogene, Neogene and Quaternary. Paleogene further divided into 3 parts, Paleocene, Eocene, Oligocene, and Neogene further divided into 2 parts, Miocene and Pliocene, and then Quaternary further divided into 2 parts, Pleistocene. This is marked as the major glaciation and the Holocene. So these are the overall division of the geological time scale. We will try to understand in which time period what the major changes taking place. So let us see, first of all, evidence for a lack of free oxygen in Earth's early atmosphere. As I told you earlier that there were no oxygen when life first reported life on the Earth's surface. There were no oxygen, and evidence says that there were no oxygen at that time is few of them. The first one is lack of oxidized iron, because oxidation is taking place in the presence of the oxygen, but at that time there were no oxygen, so there is a lack of oxidized iron in the old sedimentary rocks. We are not finding the oxidized iron. The second one is uranite and pyrite are readily oxidized today but are found unoxidized in Precambrian. Whatever we found the uranite from the Precambrian time are all not oxidized. The third one is Archean sedimentary rocks are commonly dark due to the presence of carbon, which would have been oxidized if oxygen, right? If oxygen were there, then these carbon must be oxidized because at that time there were no oxygen. That is why these are commonly appear into the dark color. Some furthermore evidences are Archean sedimentary sequence lack carbonate rocks but contain abundant chert, presumably due to the presence of acidic carbon dioxide rich atmosphere. At that time the environment were more acidic. In an acidic environment, alkaline rocks such as limestone do not form, we all know. The third one is banded iron formation, BIF. This is the major and very important marker that oxygen was not available at that time, because we all know the banded iron formation are alternate depositions of chert, silica and this. The chert indicates that the absence of oxygen. Chert indicate the absence of oxygen. So at that time when the oxygen were not available, at that period of time chert were deposited and then they formed the oxygen, then the iron and the iron oxides and silica were deposited. So these are the very important marker that banded iron formation appeared during Precambrian, especially the AS mark is 1.8 to about 3 billion year. Charts with alternating lamination of red oxidized iron and gray unoxidized iron, right? The chart are representing the anoxic condition, where iron oxidized were indicating the presence of the iron. Some iron probably came from weathering of iron bearing rocks on continents. Next one. Now, formation of an oxygen rich atmosphere. In previous slide you saw that the evidences that clearly indicate that the unavailability of the oxygen in the atmosphere at that time. Now look at that, how the oxygens come into existence at that time. The first one is photochemical dissociation. Photochemical dissociation. So breaking up of water molecule. What is photochemical dissociation? Breaking up of water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen in the upper atmosphere caused by ultraviolet radiation, because at that time there was no any filter present in the atmosphere. So ultraviolet radiation from the sun, this one is the photochemical processes that differentiate and that break the molecules of the water into hydrogen and free oxygen. The second one is photosynthesis. This one is the major and drastically changes took place at that time when the photosynthesis processes happen, like the process by which photosynthetic bacteria and plants produce oxygen. One of the major example is the cyanobacteria that is responsible for the oxygen into the atmosphere. Now look at the evidences of free oxygen in the Proterozoic atmosphere. These now we are now going to talking about the after the 2.5 GA. 2.6 2.5 GA relatively, and before the evidences that you saw in previous slide are the before that time. So evidence of free oxygen in Proterozoic, like first one is very good example is red bed. Red bed clearly demarcate or clearly indicate the presence of free oxygen in the atmosphere at that time, because in red bed the presence of iron is all oxidized. That means we found in both stages, like ferrous and ferric stages. So only if the oxygens are present, then only we can find these type of sequences in the red. So red bed is very good example of free oxygen. Sedimentary rocks with iron oxide, cements including shales, siltstone, sandstone appear in rocks younger than always remember this says younger than 1.8 billion year. Now you can correlate it with the geological age, that 2500 to 1600 the age called it as a Paleoproterozoic. Now when we enter into the Mesoproterozoic, like 1.6 to 1000 million year, like 1600 million year to 1000 million year, the age is called the Mesoproterozoic. So from Mesoproterozoic age, the evidences of the free oxygen in the atmosphere is we can saw by the presence of the red beds. The next one is carbonate rocks. appear in the stratigraphic record at about the same time that red weights appear. This indicate that CO2 was less abundant in that atmosphere and ocean, that the water was no longer acidic, right? After, I think the mechanism behind the formation of the acidic environment by the formation of reaction with the CO2, the H2O, we already discussed in the sedimentology in detail. So I don't think here is a need of explanation. So the environment no longer is acidic. Now look at here about the Precambrian. Now we should enter in the Precambrian. So Precambrian, as we discussed earlier, Precambrian divided into the two parts, like Precambrian in Proterozoic and Archean. The base of the Archean is not clearly defined, but this one is lie from 2.5 Proterozoic to 0.542, or you can say that 2500 million year to 542 million year. This is the age of the Proterozoic. Now look at here the major changes that were taking place in the time of the Precambrian in the history of the life, history of the earth. That first of all, before that, let me show you the smaller. This one is the 4.5. This one is the age of the earth accretion. After that, the 4.5, 4.3, there is a no major changes took place, and after that 4.0, end of intense meteoric bombardment. After, when we enter in the Archean eon, then you can see that the earliest living earth's crust, the accretion was already started at that time, and earliest BIF is at that time, Archean. After that, some major orogeny that taking place at that time is Kinoran orogeny, and after that you can see here that we previously in previous slide we taking where the red beds BIF is already there. The glaciation, continental glaciation, one of the first major glaciation was in the Paleoproterozoic about 2.8 billion year or something, 2.7 or in some 2.4 also they said that the major continental glaciation was there. After that Granulites orogeny was in the Mesoproterozoic, and after that in Neoproterozoic there is also continental glaciation, that is we known as a Cryogenian glaciation at the something about 635 or 630 million year. So these are the major events that is taking place in the Precambrian. Earliest evidence of life. So earliest evidence of life were seen like that. The stomatolite, we already told that, I already told you that the earliest life before the presence of oxygen, or you can show that during the whole of the Proterozoic, whatever life we found in the rock as a record, fossil record, all are the soft bodied, and most of them are unicellular in nature, right? So the earliest evidence of life occurs in Archean sedimentary rocks is stomatolite, microscopic cell of prokaryotes, algal filaments, and molecular fossil. Now you may think that where did first life form? On the continental region, continental crust region, or in the ocean? Okay, so early life may have avoided ultraviolet radiation because there were no any filter in living. So the filter is necessary because direct ultraviolet radiation may not promote the life. So in deep beneath the water there is a possibility, beneath the surface of rock there is also a possibility, and life probably began in the sea. The reason behind why life began in the sea is that you can see here in sea continental, because for life it's okay if there is a not presence of the oxygen, but they need the nutrition. They need the nutrition to survive. So that nutrition, it thought that that nutrition comes from the hydrothermal vent, and hydrothermal vent is where in the ocean floor, at the ocean floor. So the first life most probably formed in the beneath the deep ocean at near or about the hydrothermal vent. Like sea contains salt needed for the health and growth. Water is universal solvent, so water is also needed for the life. Ocean currents mix these components, leading to the collision between molecules, leading combination into larger organic matter, and evidence of life beginning in the sea near hydrothermal vent. That I said you earlier, that because microbes at vents, hydrothermophiles that thrive in seawater hotter than boiling point 100 degrees Celsius. These microbes derive energy by, this one is the important processes you should remember, is the chemosynthesis processes. These microbes derive energy by chemosynthesis without light rather than by photosynthesis. Like from these, and hyperthermophiles are kinase with DNA. So the first life most probably formed around the hydrothermal vent where nutrition is sufficient for the life to survive. But at that time, only the life that form is generally prokaryotic in nature. So feeding life on earth, obtaining nutrients, that is evident. So example of types of feeding modes, how they feed them is, first one is fermenters, digest chemical such as sugar in the absence of oxygen to obtain energy, produce CO2. The next one is autotrophs. Autotrophs means they can build their foods by own self, like manufacture their own foods. Example, sulfobacteria, nitrifying bacteria, and photoautotrophs such as plants, and photosynthetic bacteria like cyanobacteria. The third one is heterotrophs, can't make their own food, so they must find nutrients in the environment to eat. Okay, so prokaryotes are generally of the heterotrophs in nature, so they are dependent on the other. But the nutrition is not very enough to feed all these animals, all these life. That is why the availability or abundance of the autotroph increases when they makes their own food, because they are not dependent on the hydrothermal vent or dependent on the other sources. They can make their own food. So evolution, you can say evolution of early life. So the earliest cell had to form and exist in anaerobic condition. I already said you that before oxygen the life is already there. So like have been anaerobic bacteria or archaea. Some of the early organisms, because of photosynthesis, possibly due to a storage of raw material for energy. Oxygen was a best product of photosynthesis. I already told you that the cyanobacteria that makes their own food, oxygen for them is only a waste product. Sequences of oxygen building up the atmosphere. The first one is ozone layer, which absorb the ultraviolet, because previously we discussed that there were no any filter layer. That is why the life is only possible under the shadow, only possible under the water. Because of that, if the life was above on that, then ultraviolet is very harmful and they will not promote any life. So it also indicated that the life first of all formed at the ocean near the hydrothermal vent. The second one is end of banded iron formation. It is also indicated. And third one is oxidation. That is also indicated the availability of oxygen, aerobic metabolism, and development of eukaryotic cell which could cope with oxygen in the atmosphere. Prokaryotic versus eukaryotic. You can look at the differences between them. The prokaryotics organisms are produced by asexually, while the eukaryotes are produced by the sexually. That is why the prokaryotes are generally very simple in nature and very unicellular, simple in nature, but these can produce sexually, and they are of multiple and complex in nature sexually. So through the union of egg and sperm, this combine these chromosomes from each parent and leads genetic recombination and increased variability, right? You can understand by this one is the eukaryotics and this one is the prokaryotic. You can see here, this is a very simple living, but eukaryotics has one well formed nucleus and it has some complex structure in comparison to the prokaryotics. The two term, lithologic term, we will further use frequently for the craton is granulites and greenstones. Granulites and greenstone. These are two important formations that are very important for the Archean is granulites and greenstone. Look at here, what is this term? Greenstone, the green color comes from the, you all may study the green cyst facies like chlorite, epidote like minerals gives the green color. That is why they are called the green cyst facies. So greenstone metamorphosed volcanic rocks and sediments derived from the weathering and erosion. Greenstone volcanic rocks commonly have pillow structure. Pillow basalt may be already familiar with this term, indicating extrusion underwater. The green color is the result of low grade metamorphism, that is called green cyst metamorphic facies, producing green mineral such as chlorite and horn. So these are the characteristics of the greenstone that we frequently found in all the cratons of the Archean age. On the other hand, granulite indication of the high grade metamorphism, that is high temperature metamorphism, highly metamorphosed gneisses, metamorphosed tonalites, granodiorite and granites and anathocytes layered into the gabbroic, and granulites formed from partially melted crust, that is it is also indication of the partial melting, and sediments in the subduction zone. Right, so these are the basic definition of the granulites and greenstone belt. So in the next lecture video, so for now it is we completed about the Precambrian. From the next lecture video, we will going to understand or discuss about the Paleozoic history. First of all, Paleozoic, Cenozoic in very short. After that, we will going to start the main topic like cratons of the India. Especially we will start from the Dharwar craton, and especially craton. All of you know that in stratigraphy, the 90% of the thing, 95% of the things you have to remember. But what I can do is I can present that things in a simple manner or arranged manner, so that you will benefited and you can remember that thing. So especially craton I will discuss in detail. After that, the things that is not very important or smaller things only I will show you the lithology and lithostratigraphy, and what important things is that you have to remember their things. So thank you. Now we will discuss in the next lecture video about the Paleozoic and the craton. Thank you.